It's 7:27 West African time, and this is Daybreak. Thanks for staying with us. I'm sure Vimbai Mutinere Ekpenyong is set to take us through the newspaper headlines. Hello, Vimbai.
Yes, absolutely. Hello again, Benga, and good morning again, Yolanda.
Good morning.
Dr. Constance has traveled briefly. She's pepper souping and jollofing somewhere in the world. So we will hold down the fort until she returns. So let's get straight into the papers of the day. Of course, we do always begin with this day, our newspaper of record. And this day is leading with a conversation that seems to have been developing over the past 3 days, which is the back and forth that's been taking place between the former Vice President, Waziri Adamawa Atiku Abubakar, and the presidency. Today's headline reads, APC to Atiku, instigating anarchy, degrading to your status as ex-Vice President. Now, this was disclosed in a statement by the APC's National Publicity Secretary, that's Felix Moka. And in his statement, he's responding to those earlier statements that had been stated by Paul Ibe, who is a spokesperson to Atiku, where he had spoken about the pervasive hunger in the land. And in speaking about the pervasive hunger, he had highlighted the French Revolution, the 1917 Russian Revolution, and also the Arab Spring, and said that if care is not taken, the same ingredients that created these revolutions are prevalent here in Nigeria. That's his position. He also went on to give the example of EndSARS and said EndSARS is, in his own estimation, another example of that, heightened frustration in the polity and so forth that leads to these type of outbursts. Now, of course, in response, the presidency is saying that this is a call for anarchy, that in fact what the ex-vice president is doing is he is trying to incite the masses to rise up where there's no reason to rise up. They're asking for the statistics and empirical evidence of those that are dying of hunger. And they're also saying, well, when you were the vice president, what did you really do to contribute towards the eradication of poverty and hunger? So a lot of these conversations happening. Wenga, I'll take your comments on this, especially given the fact that these comments from Atiku also coincided with reduced inflation numbers, and the presidency also saying that, look, our reforms are working.
Absolutely, Vimbai. The time has come for everyone to tell the truth as it is. The honest truth is that the tension in the land, the hunger in the land, and does not really balance with the intervention the federal government is making. Even the economic experts have come out to say that the figures, despite showing some record stability, still does not reflect the reality. The figures will not put food on the table, just like they say that hunger don't lie. So we need to face the reality. We still need further intervention. Be that as it may, the Atiku Abubakar has had his own time as Nigeria's vice president of Nigeria between 1999 to 2007, and there were some bold economic reforms that he spearheaded under the leadership of former President Olusegun Obasanjo, and we know that those were bold, that made a bold impact. But be that as it may, it's time to separate politics from governance, so that when you are making a constructive input into the way forward, it shouldn't be perceived as politicizing or heating up the polity unnecessarily. I think even prelude to the 2023 elections, we interviewed all the candidates, and I think Atiku Abubakar made one of the most insightful contributions when it comes to economic reforms. I remember that he was one of those who said that the way that while fuel subsidy needed to be removed, that he would engage all stakeholders and it will be a periodic matter. We saw President Tinubu making that audacious move, because that has been the fly in the ointment for several successful administrations. And we also recall that just last year, the former governor of Ekiti State said that during the 2012, when they were protesting against the subsidy removal, that they were only politicizing. So that should go down in history, that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has taken that audacious move to set the way forward. But I think Atiku Abubakar is also coming from the point of experience on how the economy should go by saying that it will be a gradual process, because every Nigerian felt the brunt when the two bold economic reforms, that's the removal of the fuel subsidy and flotation of the naira. And now recently he said that the oil sector should be divested. We could see what's happening also with the Dangote expansion. It shows that the success is that factor that shows whose ideas come to birth, and we just cannot stop the timing. I think in the oil sector that he has made, there was a time when the depot owners were the power brokers within the oil sector value chain, but somehow they could not see beyond their nose, pardon me, and we cannot stop someone, a man of vision like Dangote, spearheading that reform, spearheading where Africa should be. Remember, yesterday he spoke about a time just before the birth of Dangote refinery that just 2 African countries were importing, and now we're not importing fuel, and now they have also joined the circle. So it shows that he is not putting the depot owners or some investors out of business. But I think the way forward is sorry, let me just quickly add this. I beg your pardon. The depot owners need to come together to do a crowdfunding where they could also have a stake in the oil sector value chain.
Okay. All right. We'll look at that story in greater detail a little bit later, because for now we just wanted to round up on whether Atiku Abubakar, referring to past historical events and comparing some of the ingredients that led to those events, the French Revolution, namely the 1917 Russian Revolution, the Arab Spring, whether that constitutes instigating and whether that constitutes heating up the polity. Because some people might say that his role as an opposition leader is to ensure that he continues to hold this administration accountable. So I think the debate here is whether it is instigating anarchy for one to say that in other places in the world we've seen similar conditions prevailing and this was the outcome that it led to. So in some people might argue and say, well, he's just raising an alarm and saying that, well, let's prevent things from going in this direction, as opposed to him specifically speaking to people and saying, well, people, this is where we should go. It should be a revolution. And you know, we see this back and forth that continues to happen around where we're drawing the line between our freedom of speech, really, and our freedom of expression. But I think here it was a little bit more alarming because of the stature of the person, the individual who has said these statements. But we'll move on quickly, still on the front page of this day, looking at oil and gas, which continues to dominate headlines. It's not going anywhere, but this time from the NUPRC, the regulator, is speaking of reforms in oil and the gas sector that have delivered $18 billion in field development plans in 2025. We know that this is significant because, of course, right now we're trying to get production up. We know that our production has increased, but it's still not yielding the type of revenue that we want to see from it. All right, let's now go to Punch newspaper. Punch leads with agriculture. The front page reads, FG unveils agric reforms, moves to create 21 million jobs. Now, of course, you know, earlier we took a story about the EU making a commitment to investing in Nigerian agriculture by expanding irrigation and so forth. This particular initiative from the government, which was unveiled at the Food and Agriculture Organization's National and Sub-Regional Hand-in-Hand Investment Forum, is about investing in irrigation, creating more access to credit for farmers, land registration, and the various speakers just spoke about the potential of agriculture and investing in agriculture. Yolanda, you know, we had a conversation with the Minister of Agriculture the other day. There's so much conversation around cashew nuts, cocoa, cocoa, shea nuts, our agricultural produce, beyond food security, which continues to be a sticking issue, there's also how can we mechanize our agriculture so that it can become something that's viable and contributes more substantially towards our economy?
That's a very good question, Vimbai. And, you know, it's interesting that you mentioned the minister, because as we took that report, he was actually present at that event when, you know, the EU was talking about their collaboration with Nigeria. To answer your question, I don't think those answers are as easy and as straightforward as they may appear. There's so many factors that affect how agriculture is seen and dealt with in Nigeria. Just yesterday, do you remember, Benga, how we spoke about insecurity and the effect that that has on agriculture? Also, as the minister was here, we also had an off-mic moment where we were talking about the various aspects that are involved when it comes to farming. You had asked him that day about, you know, the tractors and what had happened to that. But there are so many factors such as, you know, theft of material, theft of tractors, theft of all of these things that can dampen how farming is carried out. But one thing I want to really just bring out from this is the creation of this 21 million jobs. For how long are we going to continue to talk about jobs that can possibly be created? I don't think there are enough reports that give feedback on people that have actually, you know, been employed when such ventures are brought out. We always talk about the possibility of things, what could happen in the future, but there's no feedback mechanism for what has actually been done previously.
Absolutely, that's a very valid point. Where's the accountability? Again, that's where the conversation goes back to in all of this. You know, speaking about all of those inputs, again, they still haven't been delivered. After that conversation, the minister, you know, promised us that very soon. We continue to see more commentary coming out. So, you know, great to make all these bold proclamations, declarations, announcements, but can they start to translate into something tangible for the common man? Yolanda, I'm going to stay with you very quickly, still on the front page of the Punch. We took the story in our bulletin today, and it's, of course, naturally would be on the front page of some newspapers, which is about that fire on Broad Street in Lagos Island. Those harrowing videos, if our producer would help us to pull the videos up, of individuals jumping from the 6-story building. You know, we now know that 4 people have been hospitalized and that the fire originated from the inverter room. Just some quick comments on this. I'm wondering, where was the fire escape? Shouldn't the fire trucks have ladders to bring people down? You know, so many questions here. Yeah.
You know, Vimbai, panic is a very dangerous thing, especially when there are so many people around. When you are in a high pressure situation, it's very hard to maintain your presence of mind. And it's very unfortunate, just as you rightly mentioned, that you see people trying to jump out of windows. What happened to the fire exits? What happened to the protocol that organizations are always supposed to go over, you know, such as, you know, what are those places called, those meeting points when there's a fire?
The fire drills.
Exactly. There's usually a designated meeting point for when fires break out, and there's protocol that is given, but it doesn't seem like any of that was in place. I mean, looking at the visuals, you still see that there are people trying to break more windows, trying to help people, throwing bean bags out of the windows so that they can jump and land safely. It was such an unfortunate thing to witness, sincerely.
Absolutely. Now let's move to the New Telegraph. Benga, I need you to bring out your political muscle now on the front page of the New Telegraph. It leads with a story about Nyisa Mwike, but I actually want to focus on another story. The lead story says 2027, Wike on a mission to destroy PDP, not acting in APC's interest. This is an allegation. However, at the bottom of the front page is some insight into the River State sole administrator, outgoing, that's Ibok Ete Ibas, who made the statement at a public lecture that took place yesterday that emergency rule in Rivers State was a necessity and not a choice. To quote him directly, he said that it was a necessity brought upon us by insecurity, political impasse, and a breakdown of trust. The question here is, what about our institutions? Very quickly to Vanguard, still on the same story. Vanguard has the bold headline that says Rivers, hope mixed views as emergency rule ends tomorrow. That's on the front page of the Vanguard. And within the report is PDP that is warning the returning governor Fubara against crossing the floor, joining APC. CUPP, CUP, are saying Fubara is returning a conquered man. He's just coming to, decorate the office. And several other views as, of course, we count down to tomorrow. Benga, your thoughts on this massive deadline that we're going to see finally elapsing after a long 6-month suspension?
Yeah, you talked about political muzzle, so I was wondering if the muzzle is really there. But anyway, be that as it may.
I've seen it.
So much anxiety.
Yeah.
Less than 24 hours to the end of state of emergency rule in Rivers State. And because the situation and the pronouncement did not pass through the National Assembly, at least when it was initially pronounced, that looks more like a state capture and an institutional breakdown in Rivers State. There have been lots of protests and counter-protests, but I think that as the sole administrator, retired Vice Admiral Ibok Ibas will be leaving, there's a need for transparency and accountability. When you're leaving an office, there's a need to compare notes and there's a need to engage the incoming administration on what you met on ground and what you're leaving. Funds were released within the 6 months. So people would like to know, does it commensurate with the level of development in the state? And now we talk about the security situation, the tension in Rivers State. Rivers State has always been a volatile polity for a couple of years now. And are we saying that now there've been a framework where it will put the state back on the road to peace, especially with this completion of the August 30 local government election, where there have been so much pandemonium and a lot of people have condemned, especially from the opposition voices, they've condemned the election as a charade. So when you look at all this situation, you would believe me that there's so much uncertainty that hangs in the balance, and the need for the outgoing emergency administrator to put things in order so that the incoming, talking about whether Governor Fubara has been, you used a particular language. Yes, I think there's no man that would have faced that kind of political humiliation that wouldn't have not
you mean
a feeling of
CUPP
being
saying he's
subdued.
coming back a conquered man?
Yeah, so definitely he is subdued, if you ask me. Definitely, because he lost all the battles, if you would ask me. And if we could hold on to the promise that he wouldn't even be contesting for the next election, that's a huge compromise and paying the price of a big gamble. So I think this kind of situation should not be allowed to continue anywhere in the country, because we have other heated polity in the country where they are facing severe challenges of insecurity, and state of emergency was never declared in those polities. So I think for Rivers State, I see it as a huge setback, but I think that we could reduce the damage. There could be a damage control by the sole administrator setting things on proper motion for Governor Fubara to come in with ease and set the state on the road to peace by engaging the incoming government of Governor Fubara and his own outgoing administration. There should be a complete and transparent handover note of what he met on ground and what he's leaving behind.
Absolutely. And I mean, this is coming as, of course, the sole administrator has expressed that the August 30 local government elections were a nod of achievement on his belt, if I may put it that way, when he listed all of the things that he feels he achieved during his 6-month tenure. But for me, the focus remains, what about our institutions? If he is saying that emergency rule was a necessity because of insecurity, political impasse, and the breakdown of trust, does that mean that in future, when these types of incidents happen elsewhere in the country, this is now a feasible go-to as a solution? What happened to our security infrastructure that is supposed to step in when there are disputed situations of insecurity, or rather when there are reported situations around insecurity? What happens when there's political impasse? Look at Zamfara State as a perfect example, where political impasse seems to be gathering momentum. And the conversation around there is what will happen between Governor Dauda Lawal and this rumored tension that's happening between him and Minister Matawale around how security is being handled in the state. Does that mean that that's the next place that we're going to see a state of emergency? And how peculiar that it also happens to be a PDP state. So there's also a question about, is this how the treatment we're going to give to opposition states, or is it is it a general situation that if we see fight between governor and godfather in APC states, will there be a state of emergency declared? These are questions we need to ask ourselves, but ultimately, where are the institutions that are supposed to ensure that all of these things are resolved in a civil, democratic, transparent, and effective way that deepens our good governance?
Please allow me to just quickly send
Go ahead. Yes,
allow me to just quickly jump in here and just throw in my little thought. I remember when this report first broke out, and we had an interview with the Rise correspondent on the ground, and it was actually quite peaceful. Nothing was happening. And I remember that online everybody was abuzz and commenting about how other parts of the nation, just as you rightfully said, needed more attention in terms of, having this insecurity issue, and Rivers was not one of them. And so now, tying that in together with what you were saying and what has been commented about how emergency rule was a necessity and not a choice, it leaves a lot to the imagination. It leaves you with so many questions, wondering what, who then defines what is what. I'm glad you also mentioned Zamfara State, because that is a hot topic at the moment. We are on the brink of where we've had so many attacks in the recent days, and those are things that need to be looked into, with a fine comb. So, we look forward to what happens tomorrow. I'm sure even tomorrow itself, it's only later in the day that we will have more detailed information on how the handover will actually take place.
Absolutely. Well, all eyes on River State, and of course, many people are arguing that this is what has brought the president back home prematurely from his annual vacation that he took in France and the UK. Let's go to The Guardian for very, very brief comments, please, so that we have time for international news. Guardian has got quite an insightful report, as they tend to do every single day on the front page of their newspaper. This says, Insider threats low confidence, hobble $14 billion aviation target. Now, this is an inside breakdown into some of the goings on at some of the major airports here in Nigeria, specifically looking at safety and security breaches. And it's a very indicting article, because it's saying that ultimately the airline staff, the ground handling companies, are those that are actually complicit when it comes to issues around drug trafficking, money laundering, pilfering, and threat. And they're saying, and theft, excuse me. And they're saying that if we continue at the rate we're going, the NCAA may be forced to downgrade some of our major airports, because of course we know that airports are ranked and rated according to the number of security breaches and incidents that are reported in a regular period. So this is quite scary, especially because some of us are counting down to dirty December, and the last thing we need is for Lagos and Abuja international airports to be downgraded to to a lower level. Just anybody can jump in here. Just your quick thoughts. Just one sentence, please.
In one sentence,
okay.
sorry, Benga. In one sentence, I think we really need to start being honest about where we stand in aviation. We actually took a similar report a few months ago. So it's quite jarring to see it continually come up. And that means that, you know, we need to address the internal vulnerabilities that are in this sector. Please go ahead, Benga, with what you wanted to say.
Yeah, a critical sector like the aviation sector in the country should be taken very seriously. Apart from being the gateway to the nation's economy, it is also one of the most crucial economic enablers for the country. The sector fell into a very costly comedy recently with a series of episodes on misconduct, passenger treatment, and all that. And this should not be allowed to happen to the point that a known artist stood in front of those kind of situation brings so much ridicule to the government and also to the sector. Be that as it may, it's also cheering to, and also a coincidence that, let me put it as a paradox, that investors are cheering the free on board lifting of charges by the federal government, and that is expected to boost investors' confidence. So the airline operators, the airline regulators also will need to stand on their toes to ensure that the value chain within the aviation sector is uptight, so that we can use that sector to stimulate investment and economic growth in the country.
Certainly, we need more positive headlines from the aviation sector. We've had a number of wins, to be fair. We've had a number of state airlines being launched. You know, we've also seen the scheduled commencement of direct flights to Brazil. However, like you've rightfully said, Benga, we've seen passenger scuffles with airline operators. We've also recently seen a report that some crew members had possibly been intoxicated or had been reported with some level of contraband in their system.
Yeah.
So now let's round up with our international headlines. We'll just have to take one because of time. Let's take New York Times. New York Times, because this story is dominating globally. I think this is where the discussion is at the moment. If you're not talking about Israel and Donald Trump in the UK, you're talking about Charlie Kirk and the fact that Utah is going to seek the death penalty for Tyler Robinson, who has now been confirmed and linked to the scene of the crime by DNA. Yolanda, your thoughts first. Wenga, you can round us up after that.
So I think this Charlie Kirk story has actually just run its mill, to be honest. We already have the person in custody, and they, as you rightfully said, are pushing for the death penalty. But I think the world is divided in their opinions, if we should be honest about the death of Charlie Kirk. A lot of people saw him as radical in what he said. A lot of people saw him as racist. You know, Charlie Kirk also pushed for gun laws in America. And if I can quote and remember correctly, one of the things that he's known for saying is that it's worth it to have a few gun deaths each year so that we can have the Second Amendment. Now, that is a very, very powerful statement to make, and quite ironic that he himself died by that same gun that he defended. And also, let me remind you that earlier in the week, the EU Parliament refused to have a minute of silence for this man. No, it doesn't justify the fact that he was killed, but it really is something that needs to be looked into very finely and paid attention to. It's good that they have brought this man to book. He's a 22-year-old, very young. You know, it's his family that actually came forward and said that, look, he confessed to us for with what he did. He also confessed to a roommate, if I'm not mistaken, and the gun was found. So it's pretty much an open and shut case.
Yeah, when we look at the death of the 22 22-year-old conservative leader, Charlie Kirk. It's
31.
Very quickly, please,
it's nerve-wracking, and it's very disturbing. But we could see the U.S. response as a state where there is a full institutional functionality, if I may say, on how they have been able to rise up in the manhunt against the killers of Charlie Kirk. Against the killer, I beg your pardon. But the U.S. needs to be very careful in managing this end curve, because the reports of the head of a security agency purging out this, people that are perceived to be disloyal to President Trump is not a welcome development, and we need to set things as transparent. It has maintained its status as one of the most liberal democracies in the past, and it should maintain that status quo.
All right. Okay, hopefully more time to discuss more of these issues tomorrow and through the rest of the week. I believe that's all we have time for here on Daybreak. I'm Vimbai Mutiniri Ekpeyong, signing out from our Lagos studio.
And I'm Benga Ashiro. It's goodbye from me.
And I'm Yolanda Robert. Please do keep it here on Arise News. The morning show is next. Goodbye.